Hi, is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, welcome. Apologies, I was having trouble getting on the Zoom. I hope that everyone hasn't been waiting too long. Steven, can I ask you to put the PowerPoint as full screen,
Yes. Hold on a sec.
please?
Sure. It's been a
Yeah.
while. I think it's here, right?
Should we get started or are we expecting anyone else?
I think we can start.
Okay, great. Would you mind making the PowerPoint full screen?
On your side, it's not full screen yet. For on my screen, it's already full screen.
Okay, no worries. On my side, it's not, but that's okay.
Okay. Let me try again. Here, now is better.
Ta-da, perfect. Yes, that works great. Thank you so much. So, welcome. I think I'd like to invite everyone to just settle in, just where you are. Let's just ground a little bit. I know it's the end of the workday for some. It might be the beginning of the workday when you watch this recording. I'm not sure. But for those of us who are here in the room, just invite you to find your breath. Just find the natural rhythm of your own breath, your natural inhale and exhale. Recognizing that life is happening around you. If there's any external noise, just recognizing it as noise is moving on. Knowing that we can all in ideal situation. And let's take 3 deep breaths together. Deep inhale and just let go of anything that you're holding on to. And again, deep inhale, letting go of anything you're holding on to. And one last time, deep inhale, hold it, and let it go. And coming back slowly whenever you're ready. And we'll get into this. So when I first started thinking about this topic of coaching as a tool in the workplace or coaching in the workplace, the first place I started thinking about was official coaching in the workplace, bringing in an external coach who's assigned, who comes in to be that third party observer and to support. But then I started thinking a little bit more deeply about this topic. And I realized that not every place is going to have internal coaching. Maybe it's something that you'll have access to at some point in your career for a short time or a long time. But in general, coaching as a skill set is instrumental for managers to learn how to communicate with their teams and for team members and peers to communicate with each other more effectively. So whether you're managing up or down or communicating with peers, coaching I've found to be a really invaluable tool, and a lot of the skill set of coaching to be really important in career development. So I hope to share from that perspective. Next slide, please.
Next page.
Yeah? Okay, I can't see the next page, but that's okay. Can everyone else see the next page?
Hmm.
Okay, it seems that others can't see it either.
Interesting. Hold on a sec.
We're getting there. Please be patient.
Thanks for being patient. And
No way.
now it's
Okay.
okay.
Yes. So if you wouldn't mind just putting in the chat, what prompted you to sign up for this session? There are a lot of sessions this week. I'm sure you have a lot of other things going on, but what is it that prompted you to sign up for this session? Curiosity. Awesome. What else? Connecting and learning. Awesome. And next slide. So if we imagine that we're at the end of the session, what is it that you might hope to come away with? Maybe you have a question in your mind that you're curious about. Be helpful if you share it here. An understanding of how coaching works in the corporate setting. Would you be willing to elaborate more on that question, viewer?
Would you like me to speak or
No,
type in the chat?
it's up to you.
Okay. So I'm
We're a
just
small group.
curious because I've never worked in the corporate world. I do have friends who work in various organizations, and I'm familiar with the work of Brene Brown, and I know that she works with leaders and everyone, employees and teams. But I'm curious because I think you mentioned compassion as well in the title of your session. And so I'm very curious about how you do it and what your approach is and how you bring compassion into it.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. Like more smooth. Okay. So I want to start by saying I definitely don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to say that I do. I love the work of Brene Brown. She has been instrumental in, I think, my growth as a manager, in navigating corporate, in trying to kind of figure out how to bring compassion into the workplace. So you'll see that I do reference her actually quite a bit in this presentation. But what I hope to bring in this presentation sharing activity is a couple new tools maybe that we can try, and just one perspective on how I have been able to navigate my workplaces. And I think it can be applied whether in actually corporate Fortune 500 or something else. So let's see what we think. Next slide, please, Julian. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I have over a decade of experience working in corporate strategy, corporate communications, either within large Fortune 500 companies or in service of them, both in New York and Beijing. And through Beijing Mindfulness Academy, have started to take this mindfulness executive coach journey about 2 years ago, and trained in several other disciplines, which maybe don't relate directly to working in corporate, but I feel have been very helpful in bringing a new perspective into an office environment. And also, I was a former competitive athlete. And I think from that, it's really brought a team mentality and the kind of importance of team from a very young age. And it's something that even in competitive environments, I think is really important to continue to foster. Next slide. Okay, so let's just see where we're starting from. Have you ever felt like you don't know how to navigate communication in your workplace? If you have, put a 1 in the chat. One's all around, and me too. I'm raising my hand very, very high. I think it's normal because especially, well, whether workplace is big or small, it's navigating personalities. We're showing up every day. We're showing up differently every day. And I think it's completely normal to not know how or to be unsure about how to navigate communication in the workplace. Okay, next question. Next slide. Okay, put a 2 in the chat if you ever felt you aren't sure how to support your clients in their workplaces. So I know a lot of people who are watching this now or who will be watching this are coaches. And so if you're a coach or a consultant and you're maybe not sure how to support your clients, all right. So we're all coming from the same place. Fantastic. Yeah, one of the challenges is that we don't work in our client's workplace. We don't actually really know how things work. If we make suggestions, we have no idea if they can actually implement them. We try to learn, we try to figure out, and we try to understand more deeply how it is that their place functions so that when we're giving suggestions or when we're supporting, we're doing it from a perspective of sitting in their shoes. But there's still really no way of knowing unless we're in the workplace with them. And I think that when we acknowledge that, it also puts us in a partnership position with our clients because we can't really tell them what to do in their workplace. I know in the past I've gotten advice like, oh, you should definitely do this in your workplace. And I just know it's not going to work. And it might be the best advice ever, but if it doesn't fit with where you are, it can be really tricky. So I think we're all kind of starting from a similar place. Next slide. So one of the things that got me thinking about this topic, about communication in the workplace, is that so much of communication and so much of showing up at work can affect our well-being. And so I want to show what I think of when I think of well-being, which is 8 pillars. So occupational wellness is just one pillar, but physical, social, spiritual, emotional, environmental, financial, and intellectual. And I invite you to think about which areas stand out to you or which areas maybe you think are impacted by your workplace. I can tell you for me, I feel every area in some way or form has an impact. And so when I'm thinking about bringing compassion into the workplace, a lot of it is coming from this really broad definition of wellness and these different pillars of wellness. Because on any given day, we might be feeling amazing physically, but intellectually a bit tired or kind of weak, or financially maybe not so sure, but career-wise things are flying, or emotionally things are off. And so being able to just take stock of the dynamics that are going on, I think can help us drive a little bit more compassion in the workplace. And to the right, okay, so here are some stats I found on coaching and why you bring coaching into the workplace. In terms of, the majority of Fortune 500 companies have coaches, and tons of organizations, tons of leaders agree that it's necessary. And what I'll say about these stats is I think that most of them are referring, at least the ones I found, are referring to actually bringing in an official coach who is within an organization. But that's not always possible. And so with this presentation, I really want to think about coaching in a much broader sense as a tool rather than a profession, although we know it is a profession. Next slide. So it's one thing if a company brings in an external coach and signs up all their managers to have meetings with the coach and is going to pay for it and all of that, because there's an incentive within the internal KPI structure. Maybe there's bonus compensation related to it. But what about when it's not mandated by the company? There are some challenges. One is often there's no direct reporting authority. So let's say I want to use coaching in my workplace, but I don't really have an official way of doing that. Several people may be too busy to give it a chance. You say, oh, if you look at my calendar, there's already no space. You want me to add another half an hour for coaching? I think that one thing also is overcomplicated definition of what coaching is. The idea that you need to have a coach who comes into your workplace rather than kind of grow yourself and your coaching capabilities can sometimes limit people from even being exposed to coaching. And I think other things are sometimes we have subtle improvements or mini breakthroughs that maybe are a result of using a coaching approach, but you can't necessarily measure them. So maybe it's going to be harder to ask for budget around coaching. There are tons of other things. I'm sure you can think of them. If you have other ideas of what might be challenges, feel free to drop them in the chat. And if not, we can move to the next slide. So from my perspective, we can use coaching tools in the workplace to show up differently. And what I mean by that is to use it to check in with ourselves and also to check in with others. So in terms of checking in with ourselves, next slide. What does that mean? It's knowing really where I am. I think most places, no matter where you work, whether it's in an organization or a school, everyone will ask, how are you? Okay. And usually maybe we say, I'm fine, I'm okay. I'm busy. I'm busy is a very common one. But I think when we can turn that question on ourselves and ask it a little bit more deeply, like, where am I? And I divide into three: emotion, what am I actually feeling? Thoughts, which limiting beliefs might be driving my thinking patterns in a given moment, and bodily sensations. So maybe I'm saying I'm fine, but actually I'm feeling a pit in my stomach, or I'm saying that I'm nervous and I can feel that somewhere in my body. I think the more we can find ourselves where we are, the more we can also be able to show up for others. And there are three tools that I want to share. Next slide. So I'm sure that you may have seen different versions of the emotion wheel. Apologies for the background noise. It will pass. I promise it will pass. Okay. This reminds me of a coaching session I had with a client where they had music playing in their school the entire time because they were preparing for some sort of talent show. And we kept going from room to room to room, trying to run away from the music, and then realized it wasn't going to go away. So I hope you will show me some understanding and compassion for that. Okay, this is based on Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. And it is an emotion wheel that helps us connect with actually where we are in a given moment. And I found it really helpful in terms of getting clear on actually what I'm feeling, because sometimes it can be hard to know. But if I know what the general sentiment is, then I can get a little bit narrower. And I think in any space where there are people, there's comparison, there's sometimes we have best laid plans and it don't go as we expected. And so this could be a helpful resource in terms of, okay, what's going on with me right now? And then maybe I can get a little bit more specific. I might just feel that I'm overwhelmed. I might not know actually much more than that. Or I might be like, okay, I'm comparing, but maybe I don't actually know if I can get deeper into resentment or jealousy or envy or where I am. But I think just being able to explore it is a start. So this is one of the tools in terms of what am I feeling. Next slide. And then the thoughts, the limiting beliefs. Maybe have to give a presentation or have to justify some sort of work for a budget, or have to come up with a plan and get support from multiple departments. I know for me, a lot of limiting beliefs will come up. Maybe I'm not good enough. I can't handle this. I don't have enough experience. People aren't going to listen to me. I'm not smart enough. This, that, and the other thing. But having a sense of what those beliefs are can help us to understand certain behaviors. For example, maybe I have to get budget approval and I need 5 different departments to sign off on it. If I'm coming in with I'm not good enough, I'm not likely going to get any budget approval signed off, because I'm already coming in with don't give me the budget that I need. And so if I can address that, or if I can see that, and as a coach, if you can help a client with, okay, what does that really mean? You're not good enough. You're not good enough at what? And then kind of also almost questioning them, asking some powerful questions that can bring in a little bit more of understanding where they actually are with this. Because chances are that if in a position where you can ask for support on a project or do need to ask for budget, then probably the qualifications are already there. It's more on the belief side. So that's one thing that I think is often, because being in organizations, especially large ones, requires getting sign off or buy-in from many different types of people and many different types of organizations. It can really bring up those limiting beliefs. And so if we can help clients to really zone in on them, we can also help them to see that, and ourselves to see that we're more qualified than we ever give ourselves credit for. Next slide. Okay, and we kind of looked before at those emotions, but what do they actually feel like in the body? What does embarrassment feel like? What does it mean to be excited about something or proud of something? And the more we can kind of zone in on that emotion, the more we're clear, okay, I've kind of checked in with myself. I know where I am and I know where I'm coming from, so that when I behave a certain way, I also understand it. So if someone's come up to me, maybe someone I'm managing, and they're like, do you have a minute? And I already know I'm agitated and this, that, and the other, I'm probably not going to show up with patience for that person unless I recognize, okay, I'm feeling this, that, I'm feeling this, and I kind of acknowledge it. Then maybe I'll be like, okay, well, I might not have the patients show up right this second, but I can in 15 minutes. And I know for me, especially working in big organizations, sometimes it can feel like there's so many things that need to get done at a single time that it's like, I don't have a moment to be angry. I don't have a moment to be scared, but realizing that actually having those moments makes the use of time a lot more effective. So I think just wanted to share this as well as another tool. And I'm sure you have many other tools. The point of this is that I need to know where I am, what I feel, what I think, where it is, and how I can address it before I can show up for someone else. Either someone who needs my support or someone whose support I need, or maybe a peer who just needs someone to cooperate. Okay, so that's checking in with ourselves. Next slide. Okay, and checking in with others. One of the things I've found in my career to date is that one of the biggest challenges is that many people, we don't listen. We often don't take the time to listen because we're so focused on getting what it is that we need or figuring out how to get it, what it is that we want. And we're moving so quickly that maybe we think we don't have time to listen. But so in terms of checking in with others, listening, what am I actually hearing this person saying? And maybe reflecting what I'm hearing is, I'm sure coaches will be laughing, but if you're not a coach or if you're working in an organization and you're supporting people who maybe don't have a lot of experience with coaching, simply addressing to someone else in a meeting what I'm hearing is, first of all, make the person feel heard, but also it gives us an opportunity to actually hear what they're saying. Because oftentimes, we're hearing from one person this, and we're maybe translating as we're listening, and we might not even realize that we're translating. And I don't mean into a different language, but I mean into maybe what we want to hear or what we think we hear. And that leads to powerful questions. So, I mean, this is a coaching tool that coaches will be familiar with. For me in the workplace, I basically say I can ask who, what, where, when, and I avoid asking why in most cases. Because asking why usually means I'm questioning the decision that's been made. And so if I can stick with those questions, it keeps me in a place of curiosity. And sometimes in the workplace, maybe people aren't even used to that curiosity because it might be used to being more challenged. And so being able to use those questions to just come back to, I'm curious what you think. I'm curious what your department wants to do. And then natural transition from there is empathy. We have no idea what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes. We might work at the same company. We might even be in the same department, but still have no idea what it's like to be you. And recognizing that can also really remind that we're not just an organization of a ton of people, but we're individuals, and addressing someone with that kind of individual perspective and thinking about, oh, what are their goals? What are their priorities? And how do I, in my capacity without going over my boundaries, but how can I support them from that perspective? And one of my favorite quotes from Epictetus, which is, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to bring up some scenarios which I think are pretty common in the workplace, and then I invite you to also come up with your own. I have 4 scenarios here that I'm going to walk through, and I love if you can just put in the chat the first thing you think of. And if you're watching this later, if you maybe want to just jot down the first thing you think of. Next slide. Okay, scenario 1. John has worked on countless hours on a project that he's partnering with Susie on. But when it comes time to present the project, Susie claims all the credit, diminishes John's contributions, and inflates her own. John comes to you as his coach, maybe even as his manager, with two things that he wants help with. One is to make his manager aware of his contributions. In this case, maybe it would be his, if you're his manager, that would be someone above his manager. And to raise his concerns with Susie. How might you apply some of the tools that we just talked through to this scenario? And I'll add that this is really common, but sometimes I think it's unintentional. I don't think it's always that intentional. I think sometimes we're moving too fast. But yeah, have a thought. Feel free to drop anything in the chat that you have. I want to be mindful of time, so we'll do about 1 more minute on this scenario and then move to the next one. Okay. Oh, awesome. John's emotions need to be heard first. Active listening, understand his feelings first. Do either Viorica or Thielen want to share how you might go about that? You can talk.
Yeah, well, it depends if John has a mindfulness practice. Perhaps we could use, connect to the body, and get him to feel, or to get him to be the one that is feeling and hearing what is happening inside his body. But if he does not have a mindfulness practice, perhaps just the coach reflecting back what they heard, and perhaps trying to identify some of the feelings, and then John might confirm or clarify them for himself. Perhaps something along those lines.
Great. So really getting John to connect with his body and his emotion and figure out where he is. Yeah?
Yes. Or if he's not in touch with his body, then the coach can reflect back his emotions that the coach picked up. And then perhaps John might feel understood, and he might understand himself better as well.
Yeah, it's really important for us to understand ourselves. I would add just one thing maybe you guys can consider, which is, so this scenario, and I think this happens really often, is that we come to our manager, our coach, with the problem, but we're not actually telling them what the whole problem is. Because, okay, John did a lot of work and Susie takes the credit. Sure, he's not happy, but I think there's something else here, which is that there's an impact of Susie taking the credit. which John himself, at least in this part of the scenario, hasn't even identified. And it could be that he's concerned about how it's going to impact his KPIs. It could be he's concerned about how it's going to affect his standing in the team. There's kind of another layer that often, I think, can go completely undetected. And I think this scenario is really common because we just look at the kind of surface of the situation. And I've done this before too. I'm like, I worked a lot and then this person took all the credit. Okay, but what does it really matter? It matters because my work needs to be recognized in order for something else to happen, maybe. Or it matters because, I mean, there's a million reasons why it could matter. So I would say that I would add that maybe to this situation, is that oftentimes, especially when people are running around and they've got a lot of competing priorities, they don't actually know what's at the bottom of their cone. And being able to identify that, maybe John could even go deeper with his emotions. Let's try another one. Next slide. Okay, so in this one, it's John again. And now John's made a mistake on a project that he's going to set back the overall budget significantly. But instead of owning up to his mistake, he looks to blame Mary's team, who's now working overtime to right an error that they actually didn't make. And Mary comes to you for help speaking about the situation. What tools might you employ to support Mary to get clear on what she wants to say? And feel free to drop in the chat or participate either way. Ooh. What does Mary need? Powerful. What does Mary need? What do we think Mary needs?
I can take a guess, like
Of
the
course.
boundary, the boundary of working load, like whose responsibility is, and also feeling appreciated, like being appreciated about my work, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. A great thought. So maybe Mary's coming because she wants to be able to say no, or for her manager to go and say no. Mary needs John to own his mistake. Yeah. One of the things I think it can be challenging for us to figure out clarity around the situation. Oh yeah. One of the things I think it can be a bit challenging to figure out is when someone comes and asks for help, it's do they want help actually going to speak to that person, or do they want the manager to speak on their behalf? And so that can be something to dig into. Sometimes it's more effective, even though we all have the power to say no. Sometimes it can be more effective to ask someone else to say no on our behalf. And that's something that I think I learned while working that I didn't really know before. It's like, I can just go and say no for myself. It's all good. But actually, sometimes it helps if someone else can support us to say no on our behalf. So this is, I think, also about learning how organizations are navigated. And like Dawn said, like Erica said, like Tulin said, really understanding Mary's environment will help us to support Mary. Next slide. Okay. So this one also on the boundaries line. Boundaries can be, is I think, a really common concept that comes up. It just comes up in so many different forms, whether it's another department requesting to do something or a colleague asking for help with something when there's no time or anything. I think there's a lot of ways boundaries can show up. In this case, Sarah's made an unreasonable request of Jason's team that require them to work around the clock on something that really wasn't urgent to begin with. Sound familiar? You're nodding your head, Shannon. Does it resonate? Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts on this one?
Yes, it does. I'm not sure if this comes from coaching or not, but I recently watched something about saying no, and perhaps if the coach and Jason could work together so that Jason can say his no with like say a light-hearted no. I don't know if that is possible. But perhaps the energy behind the no can make the difference in how the situation goes. Yeah, so if he himself can be okay with saying no, I don't know, maybe I'm just rambling here. Yeah.
If he can be okay with saying no, right? Because sometimes we say no, but we are basically saying yes, but the words are coming out no, but it doesn't sound like no because we haven't convinced ourselves that we're saying no. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes, or we're giving a resentful no instead of a more grounded no. So it's in a way we're still not in our power, but we are kind of giving our power to the other person by, harboring resentment, and that can maybe destroy or like harm the work relationship even more.
Then maybe it's a reputation
I'd
of,
li-
oh, Jason always says no. Go ahead, Dom.
I'm just thinking of what the power dynamics are within between Sarah. Is she his boss? Is she higher? And how Jason can he say no? And yeah, because I often see this even in our school setting. An order comes down and there's a lot of no's happening amongst us, but nobody can actually say no. So nobody feels they have the power to say no. It's not urgent at all. but it needs to be done according to the order now or tomorrow. So yeah, I have no idea at this particular time on even where to start with Jason to even help him. I've been out of this for too long. This is really intriguing. It really brings curiosity in me.
It's a big question. Can Jason actually say no? And I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I mean, of course, I designed these scenarios. I didn't make them that specific. But in these situations, often it's parallel teams that can cause the most headache. So it might be a team with just as much authority. So maybe Jason can say no. And like you said, maybe he can't. So that's a big question. Can he actually say no? And maybe that's something that we would explore in the session too, is there a no that you can actually go and say, or do we support you to say, to be okay with the fact that that's not the reality? Big question. I'm glad you
Maybe,
raised that.
yeah, maybe within the session, Jason just needs to be heard, and Jason will come up with his answer. I cannot say no, but I feel better. A lot of times it really is about somebody listening, hearing me. But of course, as coaches, we would try to steer the person from the negative into the positive, and help them to get to their answer by asking them, what is it that you need? And if they are uncertain, then we help them to get to certainty within the session. And we all know that that is sometimes impossible within one session. So I've never worked in corporate as well, so I don't even know. And it sounds like it's really fast paced. It can be really fast paced. And so maybe that within that scenario, there's no time to explore over a couple of sessions. I don't know. But I'm coming away from this one with a lot of curiosity.
Thanks, Don. Okay. We have one more. I'm conscious of the time. I know my time is up at 9. So I'll show the next scenario, but then I really want to hear if anyone has other scenarios that you have in mind. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, and I think this is one that you see a lot, which is Jason wants to pass an initiative or get support for a new initiative and is meeting significant resistance internally across several teams. Jason comes to you with support and coordinating across teams, balancing priorities and personalities. This is a big question. It's not answerable in 10 minutes, but I think it's an important one, which is might you help Jason navigate his internal environment, and how might you use coaching to support this client? I think some of the hardest situations can be where need to get support from maybe a department or a team that doesn't actually have a direct KPI relationship with your team. So I know in past jobs, that's been a challenge where they don't actually, maybe the team that I need support from doesn't actually have any stake in it. And so how do you actually manage to get support within that situation? So that's one that I wanted to raise, but I want to, instead of going through this one, I want to hear if there are any others from the group that you have encountered in any organization. A school's an organization too, and unless you're a student, you're in the midst of the bureaucracy and of the navigating of the organization in some way anyway. So I'll leave it open. Next slide too.
Next page, I can't hear you, sorry.
You're good. It's just this page. Your turn. Any scenario that I didn't cover that like burning questions about or curiosity about?
Yeah, I actually, the last scenario really reminds me of the difficulties I encountered in companies. And sometimes there's some tasks that seems never be able to be completed, and I have no mentor and have to do it by myself. And I was kind of imagining if I have a coach, and the coach would not be able to understand better than I do for my about my company, but how can she or him support me in this scenario? I feel like the first need I have probably just to have somebody on my side and breathe with me and to tell me, oh, this looks so challenging, and acknowledge this is so difficult for me.
Mm. Just to be in it with you. Hey, this is hard.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
And I also like reminds me like really depends if it's like I used to work in a Danish company, and also I work in a Japanese company. The culture is really different, and some company they don't want you to have emotion. Like I feel a little bit shame to have emotion. It's kind of like I was expecting myself, or I I was expected to be like a working machine that is very useful, productive, but it's kind of like emotion is in the way. I don't know where I get this sense from, but it seems like when I work in a Danish company, I'm more human. I can show my human part more. And when you show this wheel of emotion, like I feel like, oh yes, a lot of time I just feel that if I can stay a little bit with this emotion, probably I can be more comfortable and be just feel like wholeness in the company when I deal with all these things.
It's a really, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really glad that you raised that and resonate deeply with that. And it brings up a really interesting question, which I don't know if I don't think we have time for in this session, but would love to explore later, which is how do we handle our emotions in a place where maybe the environment isn't conducive to expressing them, but how do we actually acknowledge them, and what process do we go through in ourselves so that we can still operate in that kind of environment, knowing that I don't know, I think my biggest learning, especially when I've worked in really big companies, is that my thinking and my ideas aren't going to change an entire culture of hundreds of thousands of people, or thousands of people. And so how do we adapt but not ignore our emotions? Because at the end of the day, they're going to get to us somehow. And so how do we actually find a way to process them within the confines of our environment? Like to bookmark that and come back to it for sure. It's a big question. Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. Do you want to flip the slide one more time? I think there's 2 your turns, but we can skip that. Did it change? That's okay. In the remaining time, any questions on the session? I think I have a summary slide if we can see it, but we'll get there. Aha. Okay, so I'll summarize and then I'll open a question. In summary, it's two pieces. One is checking in with ourselves, our emotions, what are we really feeling in the moment, our thoughts, what limiting beliefs are holding us back from asking for what we need or for navigating a situation that we need to navigate, and how is that showing up in our body. Yes, we know that from Gabor Mate and from Bessel van der Kolk that suppressed emotions can show up in the body. And checking in with others, listening and reflecting. Are we actually hearing what colleagues are saying? Or are we hearing what we want to hear, whether for the better or maybe for the less favorable? Powerful questions. Questions generally, I mean, I'm sure you can ask a powerful question with why. To me, I tend to confine myself to the other four question words because I think it feels more open and coming from a more curious point, but I'm sure you can come with a very curious why question as well. And empathy. How do we actually bring empathy in recognizing that if we're having a bad day today, then maybe someone's having a bad day tomorrow. And I'll close with this quote from Brené Brown, which is, we need to dispel the myth that empathy is walking in someone else's shoes. Rather than walking in your shoes, I need to learn how to listen to the story you tell about what it's like in your shoes and believe you, even when it doesn't match my experiences. And so I think recognizing that we maybe as coaches, we might not know exactly what it's like to work in the environment that our clients are in, but when they tell us, we have a sense of what it is, and we accept that that's the way they see their environment, and from there we can help them to navigate it. Maybe just one word takeaways in the chat, and then maybe I can take one question. I know we're right at time. Space. Presence. Listen. I'll add curiosity, which Dawn brought up earlier as mine.
Mm-hmm.
My last question is, and you can add in the chat, do you have any remaining questions that you would like to explore another time? Need to
Mm.
All right. Well, with that, let's digest, come back if we have any questions, remain open to exploring this topic any other time. Thank you for giving me your evenings, and for everyone who ends up listening for whatever time of day it is for you as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alla. Thank you, Chilin, for being here. Nice to see you, Viorica. Take care.
Thank you.
Awesome job.
Nice. Cool.
Bye-bye now.
Have a nice evening.
Bye. Good night.
And you. Bye.
Thank you.